The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and to be killed, and on the third day be raised. Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. "God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you." Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Or what can one give in exchange for one's life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to his conduct." The Gospel of the Lord.
It was the start of our fifth grade basketball season. Fifth grade, when I was growing up, was really the tipping point for when you could begin to play organized sports. And so this was our maiden voyage, our first season. There was energy, there was excitement, there was buzz. Actually, there was very little of any of that. We were just excited to be able to show up on time with our sneakers on and ready to go. As we were starting to figure out how to play, I was naturally taller, and so I was not really allowed to dribble the ball at all. But one of my teammates, a kid by the name of Chris, we'll just keep it at Chris, was shorter in stature and therefore given the ball. Chris, like most of us as fifth graders, really didn't have a shot of any kind of worth, but yet he had great passion for that shot. At one point, at the very beginning of the season, Chris dribbled across the half-court line, and he recognized that there was a lane that was forming. And being completely confident in his capacity, he took that lane. The only problem was that the lane did not take him towards the hoop. It actually veered him way off to the right, all the way to the far, far, far corner. Running out of real estate, Chris knew that he had kind of cooked his own goose. He had to pull the proverbial rabbit out of his hat. And so, with the defender, with an arm outstretched, Chris, from the deep right corner, unleashed this awkward-looking shot that amazingly splashed poof, right through the net. I thought, wow, that's amazing. And then I watched Chris's face beaming with joy and utter confidence. And then I had the privilege of watching him for the better part of that game proceed to try to take that shot over and over and over again. One might say that the law of averages caught up to him quickly. But it's confidence that I want us to reflect upon. Confidence. We've all encountered it, whether it's in the world of sports or whether it's in relationships or whether it's in business. We can all too often be aware of surges in it and also in moments in which it drops out. We encounter a very, very confident St. Peter in our gospel today. For some context, just last week, St. Peter, when asked, "Who do you say that I am?" by Jesus, he did not say John the Baptist. He did not say Elijah. He did not say one of the other prophets. He said, "You are the Christ. You are the Messiah, the one sent by God to demonstrate God's love for all of humanity." And at that point, Jesus says to him, "Simon, son of Jonah, flesh and bone did not reveal this to you. And so therefore I shall call you Peter, and upon this rock I shall build my church." You could only imagine that he must have felt so self-assured and confident. And so now we enter into this gospel passage. Jesus begins to explain exactly what Peter proclaimed him to be. This is what it's going to take for me as Messiah to be able to communicate the full depth of God's love for his people. The Son of God will ultimately be turned over, will be tortured, and will experience an incredible death. And still feeling that confidence, St. Peter pulls him aside. And I love to envision what this must have looked like. I wonder if as Jesus was talking, Peter pulls him over, maybe puts an arm on his shoulder, and begins to say things like, "God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you." And in this moment, the great teacher, Jesus, who has a myriad of ways of communicating these messages, is actually quite stern. With Peter then, and I think truly with us today. Because all too often in our own discipleship, we often want to have it our own way. We often want to dictate terms to Jesus about the nature of our discipleship, the ways in which we are willing to enter and engage into our faith. And he says to us and to St. Peter, "You're thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." He then goes on to say, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." Deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. It once again returns us to this question of confidence. But for us as believers, the word that we use is not confidence, but actually faith. Faith. Where do you place your faith? In what ways do you draw upon faith? Is it in yourself, or is it in something else? We know from our own lives that sometimes we can oftentimes resonate more with the prophet Jeremiah when we fully believe in what it is that God is inviting us to do. "You duped me, Lord, and I let myself be duped." When we encounter difficulty, when we experience pain in the world, when we witness suffering such as what we see in Houston and throughout the world, we ask ourselves, how is it that a loving God can be present in our world? "You duped me, O Lord, and I let myself be duped." But Jesus says to us unequivocally, to follow him means picking up our cross and willingly entering into the difficulty and pain that we often encounter in the world. But not for the sheer point of just getting through it, but because we believe ultimately that our minds and our hearts are being conformed to see not as we do, but actually as God does. And like anything that must be learned, it takes time, it takes sacrifice, it takes commitment. And this is what and why we shape and form our habits and our practices as believers. This is why we make a point of attending Mass on Sunday. This is why we make a point of finding time for prayer. This is why we make a point of expressing charity in a world in such great need. Because each effort, each step in that direction forms and impacts our hearts. One of the beautiful aspects of preaching in this basilica are these stained glass windows. And I would encourage you to take a look at them. As we think about them, each of them features any number of saints who have lived their lives, who have been like us, and ultimately reflected on these same scriptures. And what they ultimately came to the conclusion of was that it was better for their hearts and their minds to be formed and for their faith to be placed in Christ and not themselves. To allow the one who is and who was and who is yet to come to be the guiding source in their lives. And what's most beautiful as we see the sun raining through them, we see the light shining forth. The saints were the people who allowed the light of Christ to flow through them. Ultimately, my brothers and sisters, this path of discipleship that we are on is to allow our very selves to serve as vessels of light for God. And the more we shape our hearts and our minds, the more we willingly look out on this world and recognize its challenges, but all at the same time have a hope that is founded in a faith in Jesus. To have a hope that is founded in a faith in Jesus, that ultimately we have something to offer. Because if not, what we present is merely ourselves. And while that may be impactful on some levels, it is not the totality of what it could be. These people, these saints, they pointed us on forward. They were like John the Baptist, who said, "I must decrease so that he may increase, so that the love of God may reign supreme in our world." This is the good news. The good news is it never depends solely on us. Our confidence, whether it be up or whether it be down, is always rooted in a love that is continual, a love that has served as the heartbeat of this world since its very inception. My brothers and sisters, we hear this line: "For what profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Or what can give one in exchange for his life?" And then hear this: "For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to his conduct." What we are asked to do is not alone to change this world. What we are asked to do is to recognize the presence of the one who came, to demonstrate God's love, and to allow that very love and that very light to shine through us.